So we were learning this Gemara on page Yud Amud Aleph, page 10a, and actually we turned the page to 10b yesterday. But the Gemara was all about the concept of certain halachos being unclear and possibly not even hinted to in the Torah, or maybe hinted to, but not enough to be able to prove it in the Torah, and so we had a number of sources, and we went through them already once or twice, and then the Gemara mentioned that the laws of Shabbos are also similar to this idea. In other words, first we spoke about the heter nadarim, annulment of vows, and then we spoke about, and those we said ein lahem al mashiyas mechel. They don't have what to rely on in the actual words of the Torah. It's total oral tradition. And then we said in the Mishnah that Shabbos, Chagiga, and Me'ilos, the laws of Shabbos, certain laws which we'll soon see, the laws of Me'ilos, using holy items for your own personal usage. That's Me'ilos and Chagiga. So these are all, they're called Hararim, Teluyin, Besaira. They're called mountains that are hanging on a hair, and which means that it's very minimally sourced in the actual written words of the Torah, but it's a lot of it is based on, there's a lot of laws, and it's only very few words, and of course it's a lot of oral tradition. Now, so what was the case of Shabbos? So the Gemara, we went through this. The Gemara yesterday, that the Gemara had asked that really the laws of Shabbos are written. So what does it mean that they're very minimal laws? And the Gemara answers, it's referring to a certain type of law, the law of either malacha she'ein tzricha legufa, or malacha that's mekalkel. What are these two laws? Well, malacha she'ein tzricha legufa means that it's a malacha that you really don't need the actual work. You really need something else from this work. So you're doing the work, but you're not exactly doing it for what it looks like you're doing. In other words, you're digging a hole in the ground. That was the example the Gemara here gives. You dug a hole in the ground, but you don't need a hole. So you did work which would be called building, or possibly called plowing, depending on what type of ground it is. And so it could fall into one of those two categories in the laws of Shabbos, which is good to know that you're not allowed to take your shovel outside and dig. But the thing is that our Gemara says that you're putter. Of course, it's rabbinically prohibited, but you're exempt from the biblical prohibition. Why are you exempt? Because these laws fall into a category that is called meleches machshavas. That it's, at least the way the Gemara concludes here, is that meleches machshavas, the Torah prohibits a type of work that's done with machshava, with thought, with cleverness, with your knowledge that you're doing it with that purpose in mind. And here you're not really doing it with that purpose in mind. You're not digging a hole to make a hole. You're digging a hole because you want some earth. So you're not building really. You're building, but in your brain you're not building. Your action looks like you're building. Your action looks like you're plowing, but in your brain you're not plowing and you're not building. You're taking some earth. That's what you're doing. So your purpose is not the act. It's something that you're getting something from doing that act. The other example in the Gemara in Shabbos is a person passed away, and for whatever reason, they can't have the person, the deceased, in the house. So they have to move the deceased out of the house. Now that they're not moving the person out of the house from the private domain to a public domain because they need the person in a public domain. They're moving the person out of the house because they can't have the person in the house, but it's not to get him to the other place. Normal act of carrying, the purpose of carrying is to bring something to a place where you need it. Here, you're bringing something out of a place where you don't want it. So you're not benefiting from the actual work. You're benefiting from a side point. You're not moving the person. You're not moving the deceased to bring him to a place where he needs to be. You're moving him to get him out of this house. You're digging a hole in order to get earth, but not to dig a hole. But you're not trying to build. You don't want to build. You're just trying to get. So the bottom line is, you're eina tzricha legufa. You don't need the work element of the act that you did. You don't need. It's an external thing that you need, but the actual transfer, you don't care for the transfer. You're that's not your interest. Your interest is not the actual work element of it. It's this fringe benefit that you're getting from it. Yes, Ben.
So this reminds me of the law of Borer, that you cannot take out things you don't want. You should only take things that you want. So
right.
Here you're taking somebody out that you really don't need him, where you're putting him. It's like Borer.
Maybe there's some similarity there. But the concept is called Melechas Machshavas. So I don't know if it's exactly the same, but in any event.
But why does it say Melechet Machshevet Asrat Torah?
Because rabbinically, it's going to also be prohibited. It's just the Torah didn't prohibit it, but rabbinically, it would be a problem. So it's not like you're allowed to do this. It's biblically, you would be allowed to do it, but rabbinically, you're not. So
no, it says the Torah is prohibiting it. Asrat Torah.
Yeah, only Melechas Machshavas. It's exempting what's not Melechas Machshavas. In other words, the rabbis prohibited even non-Melechas Machshavas. The Torah prohibits only Melechas Machshavas, but if it falls outside of that category, the rabbis permitted it. And that's what the Gemara's emphasis really is what's not that what's not Melechas Machshavas is exempt.
Okay.
Well, it did not permit it. The rabbis forbade it. But the Torah had permitted it. If it's not Melechas Machshavas, it's okay in the Torah. But the Rabbanon, it's also.
Yeah, I think that's what we said, Isaac.
That's what the rabbi just said.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fine. I thought I heard that that's when the rabbis were, whatever, never mind, allowed it, never mind.
Don't worry, it's good to review. Thank you for reviewing, Isaac. Good to have a review.
Got it. So I got it.
Good. Don't worry, it's good. So so that basically is the first part of the Gemara. Then the Gemara mentioned that it sounds like that only fits with Reb Shimon, because we have an opinion of Reb Yehuda that says that malacha shein tzricha legufa would be prohibited. So Reb Yehuda seems to argue on this exemption that Reb Shimon says, in other words, biblical exemption. And Reb Yehuda would say that these type of work all falls into the category of work, even though your intention is not for the actual act of work. It's you're benefiting from something external, but nevertheless, Rabbi Yehuda says that's still prohibited from the Torah. So what would, in the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, what would be an example of the laws of Shabbos that are hanging on a hair, that are like mountains hanging on a hair? What would be an example? According to Rabbi Yehuda, the Gemara says the example would be a case of this same case for a different reason. The case is where you're digging earth and you're pulling up and you're digging in the ground and you want the earth. Now the thing is that you're destroying your ground because you don't want really a hole there. You just need earth, but you're really destroying. So your act of plowing or building is not really an act of building or plowing. It's a destructive act. And this falls into a different category called mekalkel. And mekalkel, destruction, is exempt on Shabbos for the same reason of meleches machshavas. And therefore, that it's not, since you're destroying, so you're not intending to do an act that's accomplishing something. Instead, you're destroying, so it's not called a meleches machshavas. It's not called an act of machshava, of thought, a thought-out act. It's more of a destructive act. It is a destructive.
And Midiaraisa, it would be allowed.
The same story. It would be permitted biblically. Rabbinically, it will be prohibited. But here we're talking about biblical matters, and we're saying that in the Torah, it doesn't have much source for this, and the only source is this meleches machshavas. Now, yesterday Isaac asked, but it's the entire laws of Shabbos, all 39 types of work. Only 2 of them really does it say explicitly in the Torah, or maybe 3 of them, but more than that, you really don't have. Maybe all of them should be considered parurim tuluyim b'saira. They're very you don't have much source for the other prohibitions. We understand it; it's from the laws of the Mishkan, but it's not really clearly written. So maybe all the laws of Shabbos should fall into this category. And why is the Gemara really only looking for? Why is it only find this like one type of case, malacha shein tzricha legufa or mekalkel? Why does it have to come on to such a specific type of thing? All the laws of Shabbos maybe could fall into this category. So I answered yesterday, and I just found that another commentary, Rabbeinu Moshe Me'imra'an, he's a Sephardic Rosh Yeshiva from the 1700s, the 18th century. He from Morocco. So he has a sefer on chidushim on the Gemara, and he basically gives the same answer that I gave, that the laws of Shabbos are clarified by the fact that the Torah juxtaposes the building the Mishkan with the prohibition of doing work on Shabbos, and so we have some type of clarity there that what is considered work, things that were done in the Mishkan. However, if you want to exclude something from that and say that this is not called work, that would be something that would be you don't have a clear reason to exclude it. So that would be something that's like a mountain hanging on a hair. You're taking something from the simple understanding. This is work. the fact that that it says this is you have to do this to build the Mishkan, and then it says don't do work on Shabbos. That's clear. That's considered clear to some extent. That we have clarity. 39 types of work. That those are the things you did in the Mishkan. But when you want to go and exclude something from that rule, that would be already something that's like a mountain hanging on a hair. So we sort of came up with that yesterday. Now there was I did mention yesterday that I thought there was some discussion. Yes, Ezra.
The Av Melachot, those are derived from the juxtaposition, but there's nothing written per se except for a few things. What about the Toldot? Those are things that nobody's written anything about. It's not in the Torah itself. Those are derived from them by the rules. But you can say that they are hanging by a thread.
Interesting point.
Well, why can't you say that they're hanging by a thread? Because those are all derived by. I mean, the rabbis basically derive them as these are examples of those, but there's nothing written there per se.
So what it seems is that the Gemara understands that what is a tolda? A tolda is something that accomplishes the same thing that the malacha, that the Av does. In other words, you're doing something that's accomplishing the same thing. So the Gemara understands that the fact that you're juxtaposing these laws, it's not when you just do the same exact act, but it's when you're accomplishing. In other words, it's about accomplishment. You're accomplishing the same thing. By doing whatever you do. Watering the plants and planting the plants is basically the same thing because you're basically causing the plant to grow. So the act of watering and the act of planting would be would both be prohibited. We divide it up and say that one it's a derivative of they're connected. That the watering and the planting is really connected, but one is a tolda, one is an av. But really, it's one. So in other words, the understanding is that if we're looking at accomplishment, you do have a source for this type of work. The fact that the Gemara doesn't say that it's a mountain hanging on a hair is because we're looking at it as a very similar thing to the actual Av. So it wouldn't be in other words it falls into the same category as the Av Malacha. So the Gemara doesn't see it as being such a far out exception to the rule or change of law. But with regard to like an exemption here, to excluding something from this and saying, oh, that you're allowed to do, that's where the Gemara sees it as a problem. That it's harim tluyim b'saira. It's really it doesn't have a clear source in the Torah. So it seems like that's how the Gemara is understanding it. But it's definitely a good question and deserves to be looked into. I'll try to see if any of the commentaries mention it.
I also have remember we discussed the situation. Well, in Shabbat they discussed the situation in which you can use a hammer to open up a walnut or something like that, because you're not using the hammer for its specific use. It's used for something else.
Mm-hmm. Muktzah, regarding the laws of muktzah, you're talking.
No, I'm talking about, you want to open up a walnut.
Yeah. So normally a hammer would be muktzah, but here it's a klisha. Normally it's a klisha malachta l'isser, because the hammer normally builds and does makabah patish and it's binyan and so on. And so it's a vessel, and here you're using it for a permissible thing. So it's l'tzorech gufay, so it's permissible. Yeah, is that what you're referring to? That because you're doing it for something that's permitted, it's allowed.
So would that be
it's laws of muktzah. These are laws of muktzah which are rabbinic. In essence, they're rabbinic laws. So I don't know if you can. I'm not sure what you're getting at, but I'm just mentioning that I don't know if it really would apply here because you're jumping to muktzah laws which are rabbinic. But if you want to you develop your question, sure.
So wouldn't that be something that, I mean, the entire topic of muktzah, where does that come from? Because
so it's rabbinic.
because right, but where did they get it from? I mean, can't you say that in itself is hanging by a thread?
So again, the hanging by a thread is what we're trying to say in the Mishnah is cases that are biblical, but yet they don't have any. It doesn't say it, but it's biblical. The fact that you have rabbinic decrees. There for sure, they're all hanging by. They're all, all rabbinic decrees are that way. That you're not going to find some have a little asmachta, a hint, some don't. But the all rabbinic laws are basically have no real source in Torah. The most you're going to find is like an asmachta, which the word asmachta itself just means something to lean on. It's and in fact there is a. I'm sorry, what did you say, Isaac?
A source would be a dioraisa.
Right, if it was a source, it would be biblical. But it's interesting, there is a discussion about asmachta. When you do have an asmachta, which is like a source, is that just something that the rabbis found as a little hint? They found it nice to rely on? Or is it something that Hashem wanted them to use as a source for their decree? In other words, do we look at it as the rabbis found it? It's not that there was a intent that the rabbis from that source, Hashem put that source there so that the rabbis would make this law. So it seems to be a discussion like a Meiri and the Rambam. I think there's an argument among the commentaries to what extent we take an asmachta and use it to prove rabbinic laws. But in any event, the bottom line is that our Mishnah really doesn't apply to rabbinic laws. The emphasis of our Mishnah is on biblical laws. And even biblical laws, you sometimes find that there's no real source in the actual written Torah. It's all oral and tradition. Okay, so getting back to the discussion of yesterday, I did look up. There is a discussion about making a vow in your mind. So there is some sources for it. A person vows money for tzedakah. So the Rosh has a tshuva. There's a tshuva from the Rosh, responsa, that he says that if a person bought a property and he had in mind that he's giving it to charity, bought this property, let's say they don't have a shul in his town, or the shul is in a bad area, so he bought this property and he has in mind, I'm giving it for the shul, I'm giving it for tzedakah, and then he changes his mind, right? As usual, the Yetzer Hara comes and says, "What? You just paid all that money and you're giving it to tzedakah?" So the Rosh Paskins, he gives a verdict that you do not have to give it to tzedakah because it was in your mind. And Shmuel says, "Gomar beliboy tzarech lahoitzi b'svasav." If you have something in your mind, you have to verbalize it to make it into a vow. And he says, and even though we have a verse that talks about a gift from your heart, which would mean that if you had in mind it's considered an obligation, that would be something to do with kudshim, with items that are donated to the Beis Hamikdash, but as a sacrifice. But the Rush says that you wouldn't have to give it. So the Mordechai argues, and he says no. And he says he brings from a tshuva of Rashi. Rashi has a responsa that tzedakah is similar to vows of Hegdish and of Chala that would apply to a donation to charity. So there seems to be two opinions about a vow that you make in your heart for charity. Now, the Gra, the Vilna Gaon on the Shulchan Aruch, he says that he brings a proof from our Gemara. The Gemara says that Nediv Leiv might not be a source for annulment of the vow. Initially, the Gemara, one of the opinions in the Gemara was that we have a source that you could annul a vow because it says Nediv Leiv, and that would have implied that if you still want to give it, then you give it. But if you're not interested in giving it, you don't have to. The Gemara said that's not a proof because, and that had to do with you made a vow, you were supposed to give it. Maybe it means that you can go annul your vow. And the Gemara said not a proof because maybe the reason why it says it is to exclude the opinion of Shmuel that according to Shmuel, this would apply only this would apply to Hegdish, and the Gemara says this would exclude from Shmuel, and it would apply to Nedarim, to vows of tzedakah. So that would mean that if you that the verse which is talking about Hegdish, it would and we're talking about a vow. In other words, we're talking about Heter Nidarim Parchin Ba'avir, and we're saying that Gamar Balibait Tzarech Sheyotzi B'Sfasav, that it would mean that we're not following that, and we're saying that even if you didn't say it in your mouth, you would still have to keep this law, and implying like, in other words, if you're learning the Gemara to mean that it's talking about a vow to charity, then it's basically saying that if you don't follow Shmuel, you would have to give it to charity, even though it's only in your heart. Now, I don't know exactly how much of a proof it is, because the Gemara doesn't say it as a definite. It says not necessarily, but the Vilna Gaon considers this a proof to the opinion of the Mordechai. Now, there is a Tosfos in Avodah Zarah that talks about a case where someone made in his mind, he wanted to make a fast day, that he would fast a number of fasts. The only thing is, normally you're supposed to say the day before, you're supposed to say, I am makabel a fast tomorrow. But he didn't. He only did it in his heart. So Rabbeinu Tam paskin that that's good enough. The fact that you had it in your mind, that was good. That's good enough. And it's interesting that the Rosh says the same thing. Now, this contradicts the other Rosh. There's a contradiction. The Rosh earlier said if you make a vow to give charity in your mind only, you didn't say it, it's not effective. But when it comes to making a vow to fast the next day, that you did it in your mind, you're supposed to say it in mincha time. You're supposed to accept it on yourself in the mincha time, in the prayer in the Shemona Esrei. At the end of the Shemona Esrei, you add in Hareini B'tainus L'machar. You're supposed to say, I'm going to take a fast on. Of course, we don't normally fast these days because we are of weaker constitution. Thank you. We are, but in the olden days, there used to be, people would fast, a way of tshuva, connect to Hashem. Well, I'm sorry?
Mondays and Thursdays.
I don't know if every Monday and Thursday people would fast. I know Bahab, maybe. Bahab would be after the Yom Tovim, maybe they would fast.
Yeah, Bahab.
But that's, twice a year. 3 fasts after each of the big holidays. Bahab is Monday, Thursday, Monday. Some have a custom to fast because to atone for overindulging on the holidays, on Pesach and Sukkot. So there is a custom that Bahab, and in some communities they still do Bahab. And then you have some communities they'll fast Erev Rosh Chodesh. In fact, here in North Miami Beach, there's a group of very holy individuals. I think they fast. In fact, they'll even pay people if you'll join their minyan, because they try to get a minyan together to read the Torah on Erev Rosh Chodesh. There's a group of people that do it, and in fact, they once called me and asked me if I would join them in fasting and davening their special minyan. But it just, it's a little above my level of holiness. But it's very nice to know that there is such a group. But in any event, normally you accept the fast on the day before. And here, so it's interesting, so the Rosh says that as long as you had it in your mind that you're fasting, you made it up, even though you didn't say it in the prayer and the day before, you didn't accept it. It's considered.
You already have something to drink, coffee, something. You're okay.
I don't know if you were telling that to us, Isaac, or just.
I think he was getting carried away with a guest.
Oh. In any event, so the Taz wants to answer that a fast is similar to a sacrifice. That when it comes to sacrifices, everyone agrees in your mind is considered like you're making a vow to bring a sacrifice. That's acceptable. But when it comes to charity, that's a different story. That's a vow. That's a regular vow. When it comes to a fast day, that's like a sacrifice, because the reason is because when you fast, you're giving away the fat, that your stomach is getting smaller. So you're you're sacrificing that to Hashem. So a fast day is similar to a sacrifice, and that would be why the Rosh says there it works to do a in your mind to accept the fast day. But when it comes to charity, you'd have to verbalize it to be effective. Yes, Mordechai.
Yeah, and there are also some people who fast Mondays and Thursdays during Shovavim, which is an acronym for the Sedras between Shemos and Mishpatim, and those people, they would be finished this Thursday.
Oh, really? So they do the Monday and Thursday throughout the whole Shovavim. Interesting.
Right, and then also the seniors kollel that are in person between 11 and 2 on one of the Sundays during Shovavim. Well, it's in the Sephardic shul, and one of the Sundays during Shovavim, they have this thing called Tainus Dibur, where everybody comes in and just says Tehillim rather than speaking.
And it's because of Shovavim that they do this? And it's only once? It's once during Shovavim that they do it, or they do it different days, and once it falls out on a Sunday that you're there? Or they do it only once?
Yeah, they do it. Yeah, they do it one Sunday during Shovavim.
Okay.
Rabbi?
Yes.
Rabbi?
Yes, Ben. Yeah.
The ones that fast on Monday and Thursday, is that connected because we take out the Torah on Monday and Thursday?
That's a good question.
I asked if the people that fast, yeah,
On Monday and Thursday, if it's why was Bahab chosen to be the days of fasting? Is it because we bring out the Torah those days? I guess it's connected to that. If they we're going to choose days, but the truth is, I'd have to look it up. It's probably in Masechta Megillah because in Masechta Tainus, because there it talks about the fast days for the rain, and there you would, there were reasons why, it can't be on Friday because Friday you don't want to go into Shabbos hungry. It could be that it explains it over there. That in other words, there's a lot of fast days that they would do Bahab, base, hay base, and the 13 different fast days. If it didn't rain by the second rain when it was supposed to fall, and till Kislev and Nisa, basically there's a number of fast days that it talks about in Tractate Tainus, and there it mentions this Bahab that they would fast on the days of Bahab. So it could be the Gemara there mentioned.
but normally it's Monday and Thursday.
Yeah. Now, that doesn't apply to Erev Rosh Chodesh. When they fast on Erev Rosh Chodesh, that's whatever
Right.
day that falls out on. What's called Yom Kippur Katan. It's called the mini Yom Kippur. It's like a day of atonement. And I guess it's connected to the fact that on the holidays, on the Rosh Chodesh, they would bring a carbon, the carbon on Rosh Chodesh, which was connected to atonement. So maybe that's why each month is like there's an element of atonement by Rosh Chodesh. I'm just guessing that maybe that's connected to that. Okay, in any event, this is this is with regard to the laws of making a vow in your mind, if it's valid when it comes to charity. And they bring also a maharik, who was a Paisek that who also writes the same thing, that it would apply to charity as well. That in your mind, if you make such a vow in your mind, it's considered a valid vow, even if you didn't verbalize it. And he says, and even if you want to tell me that it only applies to Kudshim, he says, giving a gift to a shul is considered like Kudshim, because the holiness of the Beis HaKnesses is similar to the holiness of the Beis HaMikdash. So he says that even if you want to differentiate, it still would fit into the category of Kudshim. So if you're donating to a shul, it would be the same. It would be the same rule. Okay, so that really touches on the laws of making a vow in your mind. We're going to now jump to the next Gemara, and we're on page 10b. The Gemara says, Chagigos. So this is the new Gemara. We're on 10b. We're in the second line from the top of the page. The Gemara already discussed Shabbos. Now the Gemara goes into the laws of Chagiga, the carbon Chagiga. The Gemara here is going to go back and forth, trying to find, is it clear that there is something called a sacrifice, Chagiga, or is it not clear in the Torah? To what extent is Chagiga written in the Torah? Again, our tractate is called Chagiga. And we've been learning that there is a sacrifice on the holidays called the Chagiga sacrifice. But how clear is it in the Torah that you need to bring this Chagiga? That there is a Chagiga sacrifice. Is it a hint? Is it written clearly? So Gemara says, well, the first thing we should mention is what the Mishnah said. The Mishnah said it's Gahararin Tluyin Besaira, that it's a mountain hanging on a hair. So from the Mishnah, we already see that it's not so clear that there is this sacrifice. There's an oral tradition, obviously, about it, but in the Torah itself, it's not so clear. So the Gemara says, really, it's not so clear? Michtav Ksivan. It's written out. The mitzvah bring a sacrifice. And Rashi tells us, where do we see that it's written out? Rashi says from the words, V'chagoisem oisai, that which we brought in an earlier Gemara. V'chagoisem oisai, you should do a chagiga. Chagoisem is, it's a word that we're using to mean chagiga. It could mean celebrate. It could mean party, but it could mean the sacrificial celebration, the celebration sacrifice. So the Gemara earlier understood it to mean that you have to bring the sacrifice called the Chagiga, the celebration sacrifice, the holiday sacrifice. So it says Michtav Ksivan, it's written. It's pretty clear. The Gemara says like tzricha, it's not necessary.
No. It says nose.
Amar le Rav Papa la Abaye, like Rav Papa told Abaye, Mimai dahai v'chagoisem aisei chag l'Hashem. That from this, that it says, from where do we know that it says v'chagoisem aisei chag l'Hashem, that you should celebrate a chag, a celebration to Hashem? How do we know zvicha dilma chaygu chaga kamarachman? So the Mishnah's statement that the source of chagiga is not so clear is sort of connected to this question that Rav Papa asked Abaye, that how do you know that pasuk means that you bring a sacrifice? Maybe it means celebrate a holiday. Chaygu chaga. Make a celebration. Ka'amar Rachman, the Torah is saying. And you should be joyous. And this is what it means, chag. And therefore, the fact that it says zvachim, Rashi says, but it does say in the pasuk zvachim, which normally means sacrifice. Maybe it doesn't mean a sacrifice of peace offering. It means you slaughter. So we're going to try to translate zvachta, that it just means literally slaughter. You slaughter and eat and enjoy, enjoy meat. Have a good barbecue, but doesn't mean that you're going to bring a sacrifice. And that's what the Mishnah is basically saying the same thing, that it doesn't say it clearly. It's an oral tradition hanging on a hair, but it's not clearly written that you need to bring a sacrifice. But the Gemara is not satisfied with that. The Gemara says, Ela meyata, if so, then dichsiv biachoyguli bamidbar, when it says that you should celebrate with me or for me in the desert, hachinami, here also the chaygu chagahu. Are you going to say it just means make a celebration? So in other words, this is not the only place in the Torah where it says v'chagoisem oisai. There's another place when Moshe Rabbeinu asked Paroi, Hashem told Moshe to ask Paroi to let the Yidden leave. He said that you will tell him v'yachoygu li b'midbar, and they will celebrate for me in the desert. So are you going to say that there also means a celebration, the choygu chagahu, that's just a celebration? V'chitema hachinami, and maybe that's what it means. And that's what he was asking for. V'haksiv, but doesn't it say that when Moshe actually said to Paroi the request, it says, Vayomer Moshe said, Gam ato titin biyadenu zvachim v'oilos. You also will put in our hands zvachim, which maybe is unclear, but then it says oilos. Oilos are burnt offerings. And we will v'asino l'Hashem Elokeinu. So it's pretty clear that it's meant to be sacrifices. So we have a source that v'yachoygu is connected to sacrifices. And if that's true, so if that's so, v'yachoygu means sacrifices. So the same thing would apply to, in other words, the origin of that command. It says v'yachoygu li b'midbar, and when he actually says it to Paroi, he says zvachim v'oilos. So zvachim v'oilos seems to be an explanation of what v'yachoygu means when Hashem told Moshe, "You're going to ask Paroi v'yachoygu." And then when Moshe does ask Paroi, he says, "We want to bring sacrifices." So that's an explanation of what v'yachoygu means. If that's what v'yachoygu means, so then when the Torah tells us that we're supposed to celebrate on the holiday, it also means a sacrifice. So the Gemara seems to have a pretty good source. The Gemara says, no, it's not a good source. Dilma hachi kamarachmana. The Gemara, of course, jumps back and forth now and says, no, rebuttal. Maybe the pasuk is saying this is what the pasuk means. This is what Hashem meant. Ichlu ushasu v'choygu chaga kamoi. That maybe it really means that you should eat and drink, and you will come to celebrate, and you will celebrate before me. And when Hashem said that v'yachoygu li b'midbar, it means this celebration. Now, when it says zvachim, so we could say that means slaughtering animals to eat. And the fact that it says oilos, that's a little issue. It does say bring oilos, but zvachim is it could mean the celebration. Okay, so they bring an oila, maybe a burnt offering, but the celebration basically could mean a celebration, a holiday. So the Gemara says, we don't, it shouldn't go up in your mind such a thought. D'chsiv, as it says, we have a source that chagi means a sacrifice. So what is the source? It says, don't leave the chelav, the fats of my chag, which literally, which the Gemara's understanding means the Chagiga sacrifice, you can't leave them until the morning. Chelav chagi ad boker, which means this. What is it talking about? You can't leave the fats over till the morning. Does a holiday have fats? A sacrifice has fats that are supposed to be burned. Does a holiday have fats? So does Chag mean a holiday or does Chag mean a sacrifice? Chagiga. The Salka Daitoch, and if you're going to think the Chaygahu, that it means a celebration. By the way, I should mention that there is a Hebrew word, machig, and a machol, that means like a circle, a dance in a circle. So the Chaygu would be connected to that idea of dancing and celebrating. So so it says that if you're gonna think that it means the chaygahu, that it means to celebrate, what does it mean? Don't leave the fat of my celebration until the morning. It can't mean a celebration. It must mean a sacrifice. Don't leave the fats over to the morning. You got to burn it on the altar. And so obviously Chag means a slaughtering of this sacrifice. And if so, the meaning of that verse obviously is that you will give us zvachim v'yolos, you will give us sacrifices. Not that you're going to give us meat to eat. It's talking about sacrifices, because that's what the Chag L'Hashem means. That you will celebrate a Chag for Hashem means a Chagiga. The same, but as it says, Lo yolen chelav chagi ad boker. Don't leave the fats of my chagiga until the morning. Now, so it comes out that this is pretty clear that chagiga is an obligation. There's a chagoysa ma'aseh chag l'Hashem. That chag means this sacrifice. V'dilma hachi kamarachmana. The Gemara says no, it's not so clear. Because maybe the Torah is saying chelev habab is man chag, that any fats that are brought in the time of the holiday, like you brought a donation sacrifice, not an obligation chagiga. Maybe any fats that are brought, lo yolin, you're not allowed to leave overnight outside of the altar until the morning. You have to burn them before the morning comes, before dawn arrives. And that's what it means, that the fats of the Chag, meaning of the celebration, that if you have fats from sacrifices during the celebration, so Chag doesn't mean sacrifice now, the Gemara says. Maybe it means the celebration. We're jumping back to the idea that it's celebration. Maybe that's what it means, that any sacrifice that was brought during the celebration, but not that you have an obligation to bring a celebration sacrifice. If you have fats that were brought from sacrifices during the celebration, you can't leave it overnight. So Gemara says, Ela meyata, if so, are you going to say that means habab is man chag hu de lo yolen? You're not allowed to leave overnight, only sacrifices that are connected, that are brought during the holiday, those you're not allowed to leave overnight. But you would be allowed to leave overnight throughout the year. Just the ones brought on the holiday you can't leave overnight, but throughout the year you would be allowed to leave overnight. Kol halayla ad habayker ksiv. It says that all night until the morning. That's how we know that you have to burn the fats until the morning, and after the morning they become puzzle, they become disqualified in the morning. And so we have a source that all year round there's this issue. So if it's saying v'lo yolen chelav chagi ad boker, don't leave over the fats until the morning, it must mean you can't leave over the fats of the chagiga sacrifice. That must be what it means. So the Gemara says, no. We could go back and say, no, it doesn't mean that. Maybe it means the holiday, the celebration, Dilma. Maybe, Imeahu, it's talking about the celebration. And that during the celebration, if you have fats from sacrifices that you happen to bring, not an obligation sacrifice, you happen to bring sacrifices, those fats you can't leave overnight. And we do all year round have that rule, but all year round, that rule is only a positive commandment. On the holiday, guess what? we're adding a negative commandment to it. That on the holiday, there's a special law. Imeahu, from that law all year round, haba aminahu la'aseh. All year round, I would say that verse is only a positive commandment. Kasav Rachmana Hai, so the verse says about during the holiday, for a negative commandment that that there is a negative commandment is well during the holidays. Now the Gemara says, "Lalav kasav prachrina." There is another verse that says a negative commandment about not leaving over the meat. It says, "Lo yolin min habasar asher tizbach ba'erev." Siv prachrina has another verse. V'lo yolin min habasar asher tizbach ba'erev. Don't leave over from the meats that you slaughter on this eve, b'yem harisha in labayker, of the first day until the morning. And what do we see from this verse? That there's another verse that basically says a negative commandment. So it must be that the earlier verse is talking about the Chagiga sacrifice, not just about leaving fats over. It must be specifically talking about the Chagiga sacrifice, that on that sacrifice, there's a certain time frame for it, that it has a certain time frame. So because we have a different verse that basically tells us about leaving fats, that's a negative commandment. So the Gemara says, "V'dil malaver olav b'shnei lavan ba'aseh." No, maybe it's just telling you two negative commandments, and that it's prohibited, and maybe that's the source. The Gemara answers, no, we're going to have a different source. Ella asya midbar. Rather, it's learned from a gzeira shava, the Gemara says. So we've proven wrong all of our sources, that Chagiga, Chag means Chagiga. We basically just went through a whole list of things. Said there's no real source that Chagiga is in the Torah. The Gemara is going to conclude, and we're going to continue tomorrow, but the Gemara is going to conclude that we learn it from a different source altogether. It's called a Gzeira Shava. And this Gzeira Shava, this says a word here, says a word somewhere else. That is how we know about the Karban Chagiga. And the Gemara is going to then ask, oh, so we have a source. So why did the Mishnah say that it's hanging on a hair? And then the Gemara is going to answer that question as well, but we'll save it for tomorrow. Sei gesund, everyone. See you later.
Thank you, Rabbi.